I think what we want to talk the most about is open source.
Hey friends, welcome back to BIMvoice. It's been a while. Today I have the pleasure to talk to Dimitar Puchnikov, who is a very interesting architect who is also a content creator. Hello Dimitar, welcome and thank you very much for joining me.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. And you did an excellent job with pronouncing my name, by the way.
Thank you. I practiced a bit just before this. So yeah, thank you. That's good to know. Yeah, let's hit the road. Please introduce yourself, tell us a few words about yourself and let's go from there.
I think what we want to talk the most about is open source in a way, right? And how open source impacts, in your case, the wider construction industry, in my case, architectural design. And I have a very interesting relationship with Blender, which starts from me being a university student in maybe my fourth year or fifth year of university studies in the US. And I used it, tried, when you're a student, you have to try everything. Or at least I was that kind of student where I tried all the possible programs out there. And I was kind of quite interested in Blender, but I didn't know much of it. And then I remember I had an internship and they needed some renderings. And I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. I couldn't do that. It took me many countless sleepless nights to learn that. But I think that's the best way to learn, is saying something that you can do when you actually can't, and then you have to force yourself to really learn it. So then I picked it up, and I used it actually for my thesis project. Then I forgot a bit about it. I was actually using it at my job, but then I did my postgraduate degree at the AA Architecture Association in London, which is the DRL program. So that one is very interesting because we learn a whole array of different softwares and we experiment both physically and both digitally, and the digital experimentations inform the physical and the physical the digital. So it's super cool, very intense. I had a really tough time with my team, who are maybe even more intense or as intense as I am, but in that case we learned numerous different kinds of workflows. And then at some point near the end I realized that what they're teaching us in Maya, so in that program is highly associated with Zaha Hadid architects and they use Maya, so we had some Zaha people that are coming to teach the courses that we were learning, and I was like, okay, I think I can do all that in Blender. Then I was like, once I realized that, I was like, oh, this is amazing. And then I just started using it all the time. And because it's got some things that work even better than Maya, like modifiers. So it has something that I call inherent proceduralism, right? Which over the years I had to learn Grasshopper and Rhino quite a bit as well, So Grasshopper is quite widely known across the industries, right? Because actually with Grasshopper, it's not only design, but it's definitely a lot of analysis, a lot of documentation, and a lot of engineering, so it actually gets used quite a bit. So great tool, but for what I do, which is more of the concept design stages, it still takes quite a bit of time to build like a procedural model in Grasshopper with all the nodes. Whereas in Blender, if you know your way around, you can do it like fairly quickly. So I've been using Blender professionally pretty much non-stop since then, which is 2013, in all the different offices that I worked. And because it's a free program, nobody has ever made like any problem about it. And they're like, oh, cool. I think some people did because they were concerned about how I'll be using something, that get hit by a bus factor, which comes up sometimes. But generally, over the years, when I've also had my own team, managing like a small team, there's been a few like younger graduates that have been fortunate or unfortunate. I don't know. It would actually be good to check in with them to see how they're doing. That they learned Blender because I was using Blender. So, they had to pick up Blender to use for our architectural projects. So that's it. And yeah, so over the years now, I'm also starting to teach Blender because it is my passion to show more people that you don't need to pay, crazy subscription fees for being able to design things. And even in the offices, once the Revit has matured around a little bit, the approach at the bigger offices. So most of my experience has been in London. So all those more, let's say, mature markets like London, New York, Singapore, probably Berlin, Copenhagen, and so on, they realize now that some of the limitations of Revit for conceptual design for the early phases. So it's a bit almost fear, because there was one point where everybody was like, you have to do absolutely everything in Revit. And that was quite limiting. But now that's kind of stopped, you know, and at some firms it was never the case, but in others it was. And now everybody's, you know, a little bit more free, as long as, you know, the documentation these days always still ends up in Revit, but the design aspect could end up, you know, if it's something quite simple, SketchUp. If it's a little bit more sophisticated, Rhino. If it's very sophisticated, either Maya, or what I like to show also is Blender. But not only for the very sophisticated things. I made that sound wrong. And it is actually, you can use Blender for anything.
That's very impressive. You really need to highlight a little bit more the part where you teach. Like you say that, okay, you teach. How do you teach people? Tell me, how many subscribers do you have on your YouTube channel? Because you have a lot of people following you.
Right. So it's actually not just one flow, right? So I have YouTube, yes. So I have about 31,000 subscribers.
Wow.
And during the pandemic, it was going really well. I was working full time at that time though, so it was quite tough.
Mhm.
Then though, I had some private projects, and I took some time off from YouTube because those were
Yeah.
quite intensive. Then I started again, and I noticed, there was like quite a bit of a slump, unfortunately, that I had to kind of pick back up and get the flow going again.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect. But then courses, I also I collaborate with quite a few different platforms, let's say, so parametricarchitecture.com, futurely.com. I've done one with like Live Academy. So that they're probably not well known to you, but they're quite well known for concept design, for architecture design. And I
Architects.
also do like some workshops. So I teach students as well, university students, how to not only work with Blender, so not only technical, but also
Okay.
design studio. But
Okay.
I'm quite dictatorial in my approach, because in my studio, they must use Blender.
Yeah. Yeah. That
I
makes
mean, not
sense.
always, but I think it's important to teach them how to
Yeah.
change that, to
Yeah.
understand that.
But do you find any limitations by using just Blender for everything, especially for concept design, let's say?
So it depends what you think of it, right? Because maybe, and that's probably something I don't communicate that well. I think these days people expect, Blender to be able to do everything for them, so design and documentation, which, it's coming up in a way with Blender BIM, but it's not quite there yet, right? So in a way, I
Depends who
use
you
it the
ask.
same way. True, of course, yes. So, I'm not designing like single family houses. I think if I were designing single family houses, I also use FreeCAD, and I was crazy enough last year, one of my projects, to learn FreeCAD in the same way, which with a family. Anyways, it was tough.
Oh my God.
I did learn FreeCAD though. If you need something with FreeCAD, it's a wonderful software, just like Blender, like the core for
Yeah.
Blender BIM and FreeCAD, and now they're becoming one and the same. And especially FreeCAD for architecture design is absolutely great. It's just the refinement of the tools and the very
Mhm.
basic tools that architects spend most of the time with is
Yeah.
not quite there yet. So that's, drawing walls and being able to modify them easily, and then having parametric rooms, so like
Yeah.
enclosed spaces are automatically as rooms, and then parametric doors and windows. So if you
Mhm.
move your wall, your room adjusts, your dimensions adjust, your doors adjust, and your windows adjust. I think that's the absolute base, and we're still unfortunately not completely there yet, but that's okay, because there's still a lot of progress that's being made in various
Yeah.
different ways.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely understand that. I myself have installed FreeCAD, but I never end up using it since I'm not doing so much modeling. I'm mostly validating models, so I don't use it too much. But it's good to have more options, of course, since we don't have so many that can really compete with proprietary softwares. Regarding everything you do, like who can you help through your courses? It's only architects, or can your products, your courses, whatever you sell, it can help other kind of professionals in AEC?
Okay, that's a very interesting question, because right now, as I recently switched like my platform for my courses to a different one, and at the moment I'm inputting like a questionnaire to get to know like who actually buys my courses a little bit better, because I think I'm making those courses for young architectural design professionals and
Okay.
architecture students. But I've talked to some people that have bought the courses, and they vary quite a bit. You know, some are in the construction industry, some are in the gaming industry, some are like in quite a few. Because when you think about it, to know how to model properly architecture in Blender is actually almost like an essential task, isn't it? That you need in many different respects, not only for architecture design, but for game development, metaverse, for construction, to have some of the context in there.
Okay, makes sense. You said that you are moving to another platform. What is your website? Where can people find your products? Do you have your own domain?
Yes, so you can go to uhstudio.com. For our American friends, it's uhstudio.com. Okay. So, and on there, you can see some of my projects, so architecture projects, but also there's a link to UH Studio Design Academy, which is what my school platform is called. And there you have access to all the different kinds of courses.
Now, this is not really relevant in this context, but I'm just curious, and I'll try to keep it very short. What platform do you use for your courses, if I may ask?
It's called New Zenler, and it's one I'm not sure I can recommend because it has a lot of
How it's called?
different New Zenler. It's not one of the popular ones.
Okay.
It's let's say the less popular ones, and it has some good things. It has some things that are not so good. So, but I think that's the case with any platform, unless you make it yourself. There's always some quirks with Teachable, Thinkific, and so on.
Yeah, definitely. All right. What kind of videos are you making on YouTube? What kind of, like, do you have a specific, like, do you cover like everything about architecture and conceptual and so on, or do you have some specific approach that you focus more on?
I would love to say that I'm very organized, that I have like a 10, 10-month plan, something interesting happens. And I think that would be great to talk about. And I talk, and it varies. Sometimes I'm like, wow, I really need to make a video on that. And I make it like, in a couple of hours. And sometimes, I'm like, it might be a good idea to make a video on that. And it takes me like a week. And other times I'm like, it might be good idea to make a video on that. It takes me a couple of days. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I'm not sure whether I'm going to finish that. So there's actually a lot of different blanks. But generally, I try to show different techniques, different design and modeling techniques on how to use Blender for architectural design. At the same time, just like you, I'm quite excited to talk to different people that I find relatable and are doing similar things. So I did start my own podcast also to interview people more on the computational design part of thing, or algorithmic or parametric, whichever word you prefer. And now moving more towards practitioners, so design architects.
That's very interesting what you said regarding how it works, because I do the same thing, and I always find out that actually the things that are coming from intuition, that are inspiration, those work always the best. Just I get a spark. Okay, I need to make a video about this, and I do it then and there for in a few minutes. I don't have too many long videos, so that makes it easier. But unlike you, if I get a topic that I want to make a video about, and if I try to record it, or if I want to record this tomorrow, and I start thinking, okay, should I write down some ideas about how should I go about this? Sometimes I feel that postpone it too often, then I just trash it because I will never do it. If it takes too much time, I just trash it and I focus on something else. And I try to remember when I'm at work and I'm thinking about a problem I encounter, or somebody talk about on LinkedIn, or somebody asked me on a YouTube comment, for example. I very often make videos based on a comment to some degree. Like, it's not exactly perfect, but it's interesting. I definitely recommend this. Like, if you feel that it takes too long, try to trash it and think about something else that comes more natural, that you'll save time if you do that. I'm telling you, I don't know how many videos did you make so far. Did you pass 500 videos on YouTube?
I'm not sure how many videos I've made. I need to check that. Let me tell you in a second. But I do have something to say, though, that like some of the videos that have taken the longest, have been viewed the most, and people
Yeah.
actually choose to view them the most as well. So
Mhm.
it's not like a one-to-one,
No.
so what I'm saying is sometimes it does make sense to spend a little bit more time onto it.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
So
But
I have
mhm.
197 videos. I didn't know I have
Okay.
so
Yeah.
many. My
Yeah.
God, what did I talk
Yeah.
about for so much? Jesus.
Okay.
Didn't
Well,
know.
you think that is many? You might be surprised.
Yes,
But
yes, that's a lot.
I
Knowing
I
how long, how much effort each one of those videos takes,
I
that's a
know.
lot.
I know. Why I'm telling you this is because I passed 500. Not only on this channel. I had another channel and I have another channel, which I don't have anymore. I deleted. But
Okay.
I'm trying to say that I got to this conclusion after doing this, and I found out that the best for me, because I'm not happy if I need to use 2 weeks to make a video, to just to record it. I'm not. It takes 1 week with everything, with video editing and preparing to publish it and so on. But to do just to recording, if it takes more than half an hour, I just trash it. But yeah, this is something what works for me, because otherwise I get frustrated, and I instead of focusing and being creative and so on, I just waste more time. So that's what works best for me for the time being. Something else I was trying to hint you at is that your courses, me as an engineer who doesn't care too much about Blender in itself, but Blender BIM mostly and AEC and so on, I watched not all of your videos. I will not try to lie because that would not be true. But I watched some of your very, very good videos on parametric design, procedural design, how you call it. That might be a foreign term for many people. You have very good videos when it comes to that. And you also mentioned, that was interesting to hear, that actually Blender is quicker than Grasshopper. I did not know that. I did not have no
Oh
idea
yeah.
about that.
I mean, it depends what you're doing, right? So if you're doing conceptual design, then definitely, if you're trying to break down a complex facade of a twisting tower, that's,
Yeah.
500,000 square meters, then, any program will struggle.
Okay.
But some of the tools would make it probably a little bit easier to
Mhm.
unravel all of those panels in Rhino.
Yeah. What I'm thinking as a challenge, and feel free to correct me on this. I think that, okay, so you do the conceptual part, but what happens afterwards? How do you, that might be the advantage for Grasshopper or Rhino, right? Because you can get
Yes.
it from Rhino,
Yeah.
you get it in, I don't know if it works with Revit. Maybe not.
Yes, yes,
It
yes.
works. Okay. So
It works very well.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
the
So it
Rhino,
works with it. Mhm.
the team behind Rhino, they created something that's called Rhino inside Revit.
Uh-huh. Okay. Okay.
So they made it quite seamless, much more
Yeah.
seamless than anything Autodesk has been able to do with working with external programs.
that was that was mean, but true as well. So
Well, I don't know if you're aware, there was a couple of open letters sent by architectural
I know.
companies complaining that they're
Yeah,
paying,
yeah.
what is it, 4,000 euros
Uh,
for per license seat for what?
we
Year on
can
year,
talk one
nothing
day
is
for that.
improving.
We
Yes.
can talk for one day for that. But yeah, if who wants to save some time, go and learn Blender BIM is better.
Right, but
Blender and Blender BIM.
yeah, so I have a funny relationship with Blender BIM. Right? It's
Oh,
something I've
okay.
been very well aware of the whole time. I
Mhm.
am absolutely fascinated with it. What I struggle with is that it's its own completely separate thing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I find it a bit challenging that it's not taking advantage of the excellent tools that are available within Blender more. And I really think it should, because then that's going to become like a superpower. So
Yeah,
that's a really big challenge for me. For example, geometry nodes, and I was
I
trying
know.
to do something simple with just any modifiers, and it kind of does, kind of doesn't, so it because I know it saves everything as a IFC. But in that
Yes.
respect, it's no different than, let's say you have like one parametric definition in Grasshopper,
Mm-hmm.
and then we do something which is called baking the geometry, right? Which makes
Yeah.
it real, and then
Yeah.
you bake your geometry and you send it out, and that's fine. You can have like your finished IFC, but
Mm-hmm.
the process to get to that somehow should
Yeah.
be a little bit easier and a little bit more integrated. And that's what I struggle with Blender BIM is, and I'm actually, I'm doing these live courses, not live courses, live workshops on YouTube, or I'm designing like a proper building, something that, you know, and I stopped for quite a bit. First, I had some internet problems, some other problems, but now I'm a bit stuck because I want to show people exactly what you said. Like, how do you take it to the next step? Can you do all that in Blender? You kind of can, but like the way I had to do it with that project, which I haven't, you know, published that video yet because I'm still experimenting with the workflow, is kind of applying everything, then, you know, turning all of those applied objects into IFC elements. But then, you know, if you go back and you have to change, you do a major change, then anything you do after you apply that, you have to go back and recorrect again.
I definitely understand you. I get you. I have few points on this. I don't know if you tried Sverchok. You tried it? Yeah, it's
Yes.
definitely not as good as geometry nodes or something else. But let me tell you, like, why I think, I don't know. Dion can correct me. I don't know. I hope this is possible. And I'm thinking that for the time being is just not a priority because the focus needs to be on functionality and other things. So this is what I believe personally. But I do expect that it should be possible. It's just that the capacity and the focus right now is not in there. But as you know, the focus of the developers and everyone else contributing is on drawings, on documentation for the time being.
Yeah.
So,
and that's very important.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm thinking that it definitely makes sense that using the existing tools in Blender should speed up a lot and should make it much more easy for everyone. Because going and using directly, you got to use Blender if you want to get like if you start just directly modeling with Blender BIM, just with what Blender BIM provides you, then you have walls, you have slabs, you don't have very advanced, like to modify advanced geometry, it's a bit more difficult. It would be easier to do it directly in Blender and then to convert that element into an IFC element, right? But then you have another issue, which is the performance. How detailed is that element? How much it will affect the IFC, right? Because the IFC needs to be a bit not raw. It's important to not be too big because it would be difficult to use it, to take it together with more IFC models and so on, right? So there are very many challenges here. I don't have any idea if this is possible, but I hope that this is possible, and that at some point when we will grow and get more help and more finances, we will have some focus on this as well. But at the same time, there are definitely some challenges, right? Because when you model based on the IFC schema, the paradigm shifts completely. It's a completely different approach to this, to modeling everything, right? But I hope there is something that can be done at some point. But I don't think that should be either a priority. It might be in your case, unfortunately, for you, because you want to have the full workflow and so on. I still think there are other critical things that people need in order to get more users to use it. Before we get there where, okay, we have many architects and engineers using Blender as a modeling tool, and then to bridge the gap between Blender and Blender BIM. But I do hope that technically is possible.
Yeah, so Sverchok, you know, is the Russian word for grasshopper. So those guys, they are architects that started designing it. And, you know, I think they're doing a great job. It's very Pythonic. It's great, but it's also quite low level, right? So you really need to know how to do things. And if I go to that level, if I need to go to that level, I just go to Grasshopper just because that's what I'm a little bit more comfortable with. And for the other use cases, I can just use Blender with modifiers and geometry nodes to get something that's, you know, fairly complex without having to go through Sverchok. I think Sverchok is for very kind of computationally heavy workflows.
Yeah. I'm not against that. I definitely understand that. And I think it's also, it might be limited. I think it's not, Sverchok itself is not really developed. You can do some things, but I don't think you can use it to the same
like
degree.
They have loads and loads and loads of like different tools, and they even found like a way to incorporate solids with like via like open cascade into Blender, which is fantastic. But it's all about user friendliness, right? If it takes a lot of time for people, then, you know, not a lot of people are going to pick it up, which is again, so I just want to mention one point for Blender BIM, and that is that right now, I have kind of like my workflow for drawing walls. Let's pick like not something that I do. Well, actually, in a way, it is also something what I do, which is like, let's say a
There are so many other things we could talk about. I'm very happy that you accepted my invitation, and I'm looking forward actually to have more chats with you on these matters, because we have many things that we use to some degree overlapping and so on, and we are passionate about the same thing, and we want to get Blender to be used for everything, for architecture and engineering. So let's do that, because now you need to leave, and I also need to leave. Let's have another chat and dive deeper into, we can cover better exactly these issues rising around Blender BIM and Blender. And
yeah.
until then, maybe I get the chance, if you did not do it, but I get the chance to talk to Dion about this and see what he thinks. And yeah, maybe we make it a bit more interesting.
No, we should probably have another. It's been a while for like an OS arc, meetup where we get like most of the people that we talk in there, just have a wider conversation.
Yeah, definitely. November, it's a very busy month for many people. Not for me. Yeah, for me it's always, but it's a bit difficult. But yeah, during these meetings lately, we had someone who presented something. So, but it would be cool actually to have like an open chat about in general about this kind of issues. Yeah, given that we can accommodate some times that Dion can join, and you also. I used to have him at 9 a.m. our time, or 10 a.m. your time, because then it was evening for him on Saturdays. And that's how we had it last 2 months. I don't know about November yet. We did not decide anything because I did not have a guest. But yeah, it's definitely something else. But I would like to continue our conversation here on BIMvoice.
Yeah,
So
sounds good.
if you accept it, thank you very much for now. And I'm really looking forward to the next one.
Thanks so much for having me.